We are now live. Hi.
Hi, Dolly. Hi, Preston.
Hello. Sorry about that, everyone. I hope you can still find us. Hold on.
I'm going to reintroduce the link on Facebook. Don't worry.
All right. Yeah, we had some major technical difficulties. So I know some of you are probably wondering what the heck is going on. But we figured it out. And let me see. I don't know if we have anyone actually.
Yes, it's filling up fast. They know we're here.
All right. Sorry, guys. We had some weird technical difficulties there. So I am so sorry. I will just give you all a second to get back in, but we are going to get started with our show tonight. And let me just redo the bio, because we definitely want to know who our guest is. And you can see him here. His name is Robert Peterson. He goes by Bob. We're super happy to welcome him tonight to episode 34 of The Light Gate. And Bob has been having out-of-body experiences for quite some time. He has been studying and inducing out-of-body and psychic experiences since he graduated from high school in 1979. He graduated in 1984 from the University of Minnesota Institute of Technology with a BS degree in computer science, and it was while attending the university that he became more proficient at out-of-body exploration while keeping, I'm so glad for this, detailed journeys of his experiences. And it was at this time that he did volunteer work for a student-based organization called the Minnesota Society for Parapsychological Research, which gave him experience as a ghostbuster. So we will probably be talking about that as well. I certainly hope so. But since college, he's had a very successful career in systems level computer programming. Lived in Phoenix in 85 and 86, where he started editing and occasionally contributing articles for a local spiritually themed newsletter called The Spontaneous Self. And in 87, moved to Rochester, Minnesota, where he worked as a contract programmer at the IBM plant until 1996. It was at this time that he compiled his experiences and journals into his first and really excellent book called Out of Body Experiences, How to Have Them and What to Expect, published by Hampton Roads Publishing. And this has been available online for free since 1996. That's amazing. And he's followed that up with several other books. His second book, Lessons Out of the Body, was published in 2001. And since then has not looked back. His third book is a novel titled The Gospel According to Mike. He also has other books such as Hacking the Out-of-Body Experience and Answers Within. And, of course, has written many articles about various aspects of OBEs, which you can and should read on his website, which you can find in the show notes. Currently, he lives in Brainerd, Minnesota with his wife and soulmate, Kathy, and his hobbies include riding, traveling, biking, woodworking, stained glass, fishing, kayaking, and other strategy games. So thanks so much, Bob, for holding on with us through these technical difficulties. But it looks like we are now back online and our chat room is filled up. So thank you all for being patient with us. These things happen, but we have overcome them. And yeah, Bob, thank you so much for coming onto the show. I truly appreciate it. Let me unmute. Oh, there you go.
Thanks, Preston, for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. And thank you, Dolly, too. You know, I'm a big fan of yours too, Preston, because your book, Out of Body Exploring, is excellent. It's one of the few that I've given 5-star rating to. I've been doing book reviews on my blog for, I've been doing my blog for 11 years now, and I've done 135 astral projection books, and most people don't know there even are that many, but there's actually more than 250, I think, about now. And yeah, so I still have a lot of in reserve that I haven't reviewed yet, but yours is one of the very few that got a 5-star rating, so thumbs up.
That's awesome.
Out of Body Exploring by Preston Dennett.
Thanks so much, Bob. That's coming from you. Extremely high praise. I'm humbled and delighted. That is awesome. Thanks so much. Well, I feel the same way about your books because, as I said, they really helped me a lot. And I do have them. I was just looking over them again. 2 of them. I'm going to get the others. I haven't had a chance to get the hacking out-of-body experiences, but that looks super interesting because there are so many techniques on how to do this.
Yeah, the thing about what I usually tell is people who are interested in my books, the first one that you pointed, out-of-body experiences, how to have them and what to expect, is probably the best place to start because it gives more information about how I got into this, where I'm from, what my experiences were like, and just things like that. And it also has quite a bit of techniques in there as well. The latest book, Hacking the Out-of-Body Experience, which I've got a copy if you want to, I don't know if you can see that. That book is all techniques. So I'm not giving any of my own personal experiences. I'm compiling those for yet another book, hopefully, and at some point in the future. But yeah, that's strictly all technique book in that hacking book, and it's gotten a lot of popularity. So I'm pleased that it's helping so many people.
Very cool. Yeah. Well, I love your first book because it just dives deep into your own experiences, while at the same time, it's got all the techniques and how to do it interspersed throughout it. And it also covers, the associated topics because, doing this brings out your psychic abilities in full force. And you focused on that a little bit too, which I thought was so important.
Yeah. That was part of the reason I wrote that first book is because when I started having out-of-body experiences myself, I started noticing things. I had read just about everything I could find on the topic, and a lot of them didn't say anything about, there are so many things that I learned on my own through experience. Of course, this is how I was done back in 1979 and the early 1980s, of course, when there weren't that many books on the subject. But there was so many things that I found out that aren't talked about, like the different kinds of eyesight. People say, well, you take eyesight for granted in the physical world, but in the non-physical world, your eyesight can have switched between different modes, and it's really kind of confusing. But none of these other books talked about it, and so it's like I had to give my own perspective and write down in this book what I've found just through my own personal experimentation. And so yeah, I mean, like eyesight. For example, I'll have there'll be times when I concentrate on looking at something like through eyes, my astral or non-physical eyes, and it'll appear more like it does in the physical world. But at other times, I'll be able to perceive everything in all directions, right? It's kind of a 360 degree, you're seeing everything in the room, up, down, in front of you and back of you. And it's more like, I called it in the book, I called it astral mind sensing, because it's kind of like feeling everything at the same time. And it's kind of strange. And then there were times when I would come out of my body and find myself completely blind. And a lot of people have this problem, and it's usually because you're too close to your physical body. And my advice is get away from the physical body at least 15 feet or 5 meters if you're in Europe. And then you should be able to open your eyes and see better. But like if you're close to your physical body, you can have complete blindness. Or another one that I've sometimes had is I'll be out there floating around. Let's say I'm 10 feet from my physical body or whatever, and I'll make an effort to open my eyes, and my body's eyes will open, and so I'll be there in the room apart from my physical body, but my body's eyes open, and I see the ceiling. And it's like, this is very confusing. It's like, this isn't going to work. And so I close my eyes again and get away from it. Anyway, that's my advice. Get away from that physical body. If you're
I remember the very first time I had that, what I called it 360 degree sight. Yeah. And it was very confusing and disorienting, but so cool. And then I was able to, telescope? I guess zoom in on stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned, blindness, because when I first started popping out, everything was cloudy. I couldn't see. I could only see out of one eye for the longest time. I'm like, what is going on? So it took me a while to get past that.
Well, and there's a fascinating book that I read. It's in my book reviews. It's called Mindsight. And I think Kenneth Ring was one of the authors. And the question they asked as scientists is, when a blind person, like a congenitally blind person, has an out-of-body experience, can they see?
Yes.
Do they experience sight?
Yes.
And the whole book is pretty much dedicated to this. And what they did, the authors went to a school for the blind where they knew they could find a bunch of blind people, and they interviewed them with permission, and they talked to a bunch of people who had out-of-body experiences, numerous ones, and they asked them to describe what it was like. And some of them were congenitally blind. Some of them had been blind since they were like 3 years old or 5 years old, whatever. And it turns out there's a certain point in time where like do you see in your dreams when you're blind? And it turns out there's a point in time that once you reach a certain age, if you become blind at that point, and you've been sighted until then your dreams will be sighted, and your OBEs will be sighted as well. When you're congenitally blind, it turns out that most blind people describe what I think of as this astral mind sensing. So it's like these blind people are describing the fact that, like, when I go out of body, it's like I can touch everything in the room and I know where it's at. And it's, they describe things that they obviously don't have the same sighted frame of mind that we do, that the sighted people do. But it's they describe it in such a way that the authors came to the conclusion that, yeah, there is kind of an equivalent to sight when you're out of body.
Man,
even in blind people.
Fascinating.
That works for me. When psychic ability is the same way. When you're fully wide open psychic, you don't need your eyes. You can use your abilities to see past you. And remote viewing is the first step out, by the way, to OBE, because you're mind sensing or you're psychic sensing at that point. You're sending from where you're indwelling now until you can get out of your body. You send your mind, your thoughts out. And it's a type of eyesight as well. And when I was growing up, I was I did special ed for a while because I had an ear accident and I went deaf for about a year. And now I was in special ed learning sign language. And a couple of kids in there with one of my classes was totally blind. And I was already OBE by then. And I asked them, did they want to try? And they said yes. And it took about 6 months. Total in terror, this kid. Total terror. And once he got out, he said, what am I seeing? And I said, you have to answer that. You have to tell me what you see. And he said, well, I know now the difference between light and dark. That's the first thing you got. And I said, when a baby opens their physical eyes, that's what they see first, light and dark. It's all blurry. And I said, so now you got a journey to go on. You have to learn to use your sight, just like a baby would. And that helped a lot.
I wonder if that applies to deafness as well. I mean, you'd think it would.
Yeah. There's also been scientists, doctors have been able to restore sight in some people that have a genetic defect that causes them to not be able to see. And doctors can go in some cases and correct that so that the person can see. And it turns out that what you're saying, Dolly, is exactly true, that they can't interpret, their brains cannot interpret this input that's coming from their eyes and their optic nerves. And so they have to go through an extensive learning process of being able to distinguish shapes and to know this is this and that's that and this is color. It's fascinating.
Well, sometimes I've had out-of-body experiences and it's in the middle of the night, all the lights are off, it's completely dark, you can't see, but then you start to get you see, I guess, with what you call mind sight. Yeah, it's a different. Well, I'm so glad you went into that. And I want to get into that more, but let's start with how this rolled out for you and how you began having out-of-body experiences before we start getting into the deeper subject.
Well, and I'll apologize to anyone who's heard me, give this little spiel before because I've been on other shows, but basically in my dad was kind of a spiritual man in his own way, and he read books like Edgar Cayce and things like that. And so my brother Joe was fascinated with different topics in, the peripheral. I was always kind of more scientific and science minded. But then in 1979, my brother Joe gave my dad the book Journeys Out of the Body by Robert Monroe. And I kind of remembered them talking at one point about astral projection and asking, "Oh, what is that?" When I was young, and they said, "Oh, that's where you get out of your body and fly around and stuff like that, and you can be like a ghost and walk through walls." All this, and I went, of course, immediately to the library. There was no internet back then. I went to the library and looked it up in the card catalogs. Didn't find any books on the subject, and so anyway, I kind of forgot about it. Well, in 1979, after my dad was done reading Journeys Out of the Body, I asked if I could read it because it was fascinating to me. And so I did. I read it, and it's like, wow, this is really different. If what Monroe is saying is true, he gave all these wild stories about flying through the walls and being able to, see people in their private moments in their houses or whatever, and being able to go down the street, whatever. I mean, he had all of these stories, and I thought, very unscientific. I didn't really, to be honest, I didn't believe a word he said, but scientists really have to be open-minded, right? Instead of just discounting and say, forget this. I decided to keep an open mind, and Monroe takes a really good approach. He doesn't say, this is what happened, you got to believe me or whatever, because they're pretty crazy stories. He says, try it for yourself. Don't take my word for it. Try it for yourself. And then Monroe gives a couple of techniques in his book. And so I decided after I was done reading the book to give that a try. And I tried one of his techniques, which I affectionately call the lines of force technique. And I'll be the first to admit, I'm not sure I quite understood what Monroe was trying to get me to do. But I did what I interpreted his words to be, which is to, close your eyes and relax your body completely and drift down into getting close to the sleep state. And then to focus your mind and imagine two lines of force at your temples and going out like 3 feet in front of you. And they cross, and imagine a kind of a pressure or energy out there where the lines cross. And then you go through this process of extending those lines of force till they're way out in front of you, 9 feet and all of this. And then at some point you extend them so that instead of next to your temples, they like shift out like this to be at a 90-degree angle. And then you shift them over your head. Okay, so that's what I was doing. And much to my surprise, I felt a twang, a very heavy twang in my head. And it's like, oops, maybe this isn't such a good idea. I was kind of freaked out. And I thought, what have I gotten myself? I'm in the deep end of the pool now. So I thought, I got to get out of here. So I tried to like retract my lines of force that were imaginary, but it was like they became real. And they as I retracted them, it was like an energy came in and swept over me. And I could see through my closed eyelids. I could see this blue ring of fire that was about a foot round. It was about like this in diameter. And it like went over my head like this and swept into my body or over my body. And I felt the vibrations, what they call the vibrations, they swept into my body. And it was a very scary experience. I literally thought I was being electrocuted. And I just started fighting wildly to regain control of my body. But I found myself in sleep paralysis. My body would not move. And I didn't know what was going on. Eventually it wore off and I came to and I'm like, oh, wow, thank God I'm still in my body. And it's like, but at that point I knew that I couldn't turn back because I knew at that point that Monroe wasn't lying. He wasn't, just making up a bunch of, crap to sell books. There was some substance to it. And I also knew the only way that I could get to the bottom of what this really is to explore the state myself. And so I went on this long journey of collecting all the books I could find on the subject of astral projection and out-of-body experience. And there weren't that many at the time, but I devoured them. I read them all. I started a book collection, which I told you I've got, like 250 books or something like that in my collection now. And that's not including like lucid dream books or other peripheral topics. That's just and remote viewing and all of those shamanic journeys. That's just out of body and astral projection books. And I've got there's some real obscure ones out there. But anyway, so then I started, like, I knew I had to try it again. And so I started trying every single night for like 2 months solid, trying to induce another set of vibrations or whatever to try and leave my body. And Monroe's technique that I had used the first time didn't work for me again for whatever reason. Maybe I was just too scared or whatever to really go down deep enough, I think. But eventually I came home late one night from the university. I was doing programming at the university, and I'm still a big into programming. And I decided to skip my normal technique. And then that middle of the night, which turned out to be the next morning, November 2nd, 1979, I had my first 2 out-of-body experiences, and they were just mind-blowing. It was like, incredible and more real than I would ever imagine they would be. I mean, I've had, and again, you're not always that, your consciousness is not always that clear and clean and crisp, but there are times when I've had out-of-body experiences where my consciousness was brighter and clearer than in normal physical life. And it's not uncommon for me to, like, I remember many times I will sit up in bed and I'll think, oh, I gotta, get up or whatever. I wonder what time it is. And I'll stand up and walk toward the door or whatever. And all of a sudden, I look back to my physical body. It's like, wow, I was so real. I didn't realize I was out of my body, and it's like, you don't even realize it's happening until you're back sometimes. So yeah, it's from there, it's just been inducing all the OBEs I can. It's kind of been my passion and learning what other people have done. And I've eventually, many years ago, I decided to start studying the human brain and trying to figure out, well, what factors actually contribute to the out-of-body experience, right? I kept detailed journals, and like I was keeping track of like horoscope things and biorhythms and all of this stuff, trying to figure out what influenced my out-of-body. And I compiled a lot of that stuff in my latest book, Hacking the Out-of-Body Experience. But I went on a journey of trying to learn as much as I could about the human brain and how it is, what happens during an OBE and how scientists induce OBEs in people and things like that. So anyway, it's fascinating. I don't have a lot of the incredible stories that some of the other authors have. I mean, I've had some incredible experiences, of course, but like I was just watching before the show, I was watching your show you did with Marilyn Hughes, and I've read some of her books and stuff, and she's fascinating. But she's got these experiences that are like, wow, she's gone a lot further than I have. Or for example, Jürgen Zive is probably my favorite author on the subject. And so anyway, yeah, it's a fascinating topic, and I've been studying it pretty much my whole adult life. I wasn't given any gift. I was not born with the natural ability. Like some people, I think Marilyn had OBEs when she was a young girl. And I never had them until I started trying for them. And for me, it's always been a difficult process. I've always had to, really focus on it and do a lot of affirmations and a lot of this and a lot of that, a lot of meditating and that, until I'm finally successful. So for me,
Is your psychic ability there? In other words, before you started doing all of this, did you know you had innate abilities, and were you psychic knowingly?
Not really. No, I did not think of I don't think of myself as psychic at all. I didn't think I was psychic as a child. I had in my first book, I give a couple of psychic experiences that, I think everyone got some psychic abilities, so that's not too unusual. But no, when I started having out of bodies, I started having psychic experiences, and this confused me because, again, none of the books that I had ever talked about the connection between out of body and psychic experience. It's like, okay, nobody ever said that this had happened, but I would start taking the words out of people's mouths, and I'd know what was going to play on the radio next and things like that. And it's like, and I don't really attribute that to my OBEs as much as I do the meditation or the style of meditation I do to induce an OBE. I think that the meditation itself can lead you to those places and make you more receptive. In the first book, I talked about how I started paying more and more attention to what I call my inner voice. And it's just kind of a background, niggling of, gee, this should, I should do this or whatever. And I developed that. And I cultivated that, if you will. And that kind of resulted in my book, my book Answers Within. I got a copy here if anyone cares. Answers Within, and it talks about how I developed my inner voice and how anyone can also do that. But I believe one thing that people don't realize, and I want to stress, is that we as human beings are much more complex and deep than we would ever care to imagine. A lot of new age books or whatever talk about the higher self, or the psychology books talk about the ego and the id and all of this stuff, and or they talk about the subconscious and all of this, but there are really many layers, and it goes very deep. And the person that you think you are, the ego that is driving the body, that's acting consciously with this world, is only a tiny fraction of what's out there. It's very, very deep. And so people have no idea. I mean, you can't, unless you experience that firsthand, you can't even begin to comprehend how deep it goes. But I think a lot of this, I think what happens is your conscious is in communication with your subconscious, and you can learn to cultivate that. Your subconscious is
your conscious being, right? And that when you leave your body, it's who you are. Your consciousness is leaving this physical body. There is no subconscious. Your brain, your physical mind, your physical body is something you're indwelling. Your consciousness is living in this body. And what I've been taught is that during the process of egg and sperm coming together, and that genesis of energy begins, your consciousness is already there, and it actually affects the DNA you have, because it has to be able to communicate with you physically, your physical mind. And your consciousness throughout the entire process of being born, being evolved to be born, is already hearing and being taught by your consciousness. It's hearing itself. We have a gland in our brain that is the facilitator. It's the communicator between the two, your consciousness and your physical mind. And while psychologists have tried for years and years and years to explain id, ego, and all of that, they totally missed the point, because they weren't willing to admit that we're spirit, we're consciousness. And so they came up with a bunch of mumbo jumbo, literally in my mind, to explain, which is so easy. Your brain, your physical mind is a computer, and you're indwelling this body. You're the programmer, and you're using this to be in this dimension and to learn the lessons here that you learn. We should have already known as we woke up and we were children that we had these abilities. All your memories should have been there. But whatever's going on this planet has robbed you of it. And so people are literally walking around with no clue that A, they're psychic, B, their consciousness is running. They try to say, that when you do something wrong, your mom will tell you, you get that feeling in your gut, in your chest. That's your consciousness because it lives in your heart. It's attached to an electrical appliance, your heart. That's where it starts. The first crack in who you are is electrical.
Yeah,
And
I've
your
always thought
consciousness
this is a natural human talent.
Yeah, it is absolutely natural human talent. And it's easy to explain that and understand it, but we have generations of people who are walking this earth, and you said it yourself. You didn't think you were. You absolutely are. And you were striving at that point to teach yourself what you could have taught yourself when you were growing up, like walking, talking, seeing, smelling, hearing. You would have been able to physically attach to this world, fully conscious, and instead it was driven out of you, and you were made to not think about it and use it.
Well, I've got a million questions actually that I really want to ask you.
Right.
Like when you started doing this, were you absolutely convinced this was real?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So
Yeah, I mean, seeing is believing. I mean, when you're out there and you're looking at your own physical body from apart, and your physical body is just another inanimate object in the room, and it's like, oh boy, kind of crumpled there, lying in bed or whatever, and yeah, like you mentioned, you start to question, well, did I just die or what exactly is going on there? But yeah, it's very realistic, and people wonder about, okay, is it the same thing as remote viewing? Well, in remote viewing, your consciousness, your awareness still stays within the physical body, even though you're perceiving things that are far away.
Right.
But in an out of body, your physical body is just another appliance that's sitting out there, and it's pretty convincing.
Yep.
So Robert Monroe talks about always having a spirit guide with him. I forget he had a name for it. Who led him around everywhere. I didn't. I felt like I was out there on my own most of the time. Not always. I did have, a few occasions, but I wonder how about you? Did you have someone there guiding you around?
Well, it's kind of strange. Yes and no. I mean, most of the time when I've had out of body experiences, most of the time I don't see or perceive anyone out there, but I know there are spirits out there. There are what I call invisible guides, and for whatever reason, they're invisible to me. And I'm not the only out of body author who's described them as well. There are several other books that I've read that describe the same thing. It's like these guides that are completely invisible, but they can dialogue with you. You can hear them just fine. And for example, if you're having trouble, like, I can't get up these stairs or something, like I can't get out this window, you can actually ask them for help and say, can somebody here please lend me a hand and help me get out the window? And they'll say, sure, yeah, I can help you with that. It's like it's kind of like the Star Trek thing. They don't want to interfere because that's interfering with your own spiritual progress or something like that. But if you ask them for help, they're glad to help. It's just, and I think they watch you and they guide you or whatever, but they don't really interfere unless you ask them to do that.
Well, I have a question then. This is leading me to a big one for you. Do you have you quantified what dimension you're in when you're OBE? Do you stay in the third dimension? In other words, do you stay in this construct that we're in? Or have you tried to go outside of it?
Well, like I've said many times to various people, when you're out of your body, there aren't any signs hanging overhead saying, this is the fifth level of the second astral plane or whatever. And I mean, there aren't signs on the door, so you don't really know where you're at. I've had many experiences that I'll find myself in a strange city, for example, and I don't know where this is. I'm in a city and I see people below and I fly down and whatever, talk to them. And so you don't really know if that's an astral city or if it's some physical place on Earth. I believe, based on various descriptions, various books, that the vast majority of my out-of-body experiences have been what they call the etheric plane or whatever, which is kind of a lower level. I haven't had any of these mind-blowing, higher level, I haven't done too much of that. And part of that is my own fault because I've studied out-of-body my whole life. And so what I would do is a lot of times I would waste experiences just by, I would leave my body and then I'd get back in it and, to study the process and what brings the vibrations back. And I would do these experiments, but a lot of times it wouldn't take me a long way from my body. So a lot of times I would walk out into the world and it would seem like the physical world that I'm accustomed to. But yeah, I haven't, traveled to any of these high planes. I mean, Marilyn Hughes talked about an experience in which she perceived like heaven and a great throne and Akashic records and things like that. I've never done any of that kind of stuff. So by comparison, I think a lot of my out of bodies are pretty mundane. But what I do have going for me is, like I said, I wasn't born with any gifts. So I've spent a lot of time studying it. And so every OBE I've had to earn basically. And so I know the process pretty well. And I've tried to explain that in the various books I've written. But yeah, so I do have a lot of fascinating experiences out there, and you can read them in my first two books. But like I have in my second book, Lessons Out of the Body, the book was not very popular, and it's kind of hard to find now. It's way out of print. But I've described some experiences, for example, where I tried to contact God. I have a chapter called Chasing God, and I did several experiments where I would try and surrender myself to God or whatever, and it had different results. Yeah. I did have, I never had a transcendent experience where it was a total, oneness with everything experience. I know some people end up with that experience, but I've never had that happen. I would love to have that happen at some point. But I have had experiences where there are at least 6 or 7 books in which the authors have claimed to have stood in the presence of Jesus Christ, and Marilyn Hughes is just one of them. But I've had an experience like that as well, and it was a very brief experience. Just being there with whom you perceive to be Jesus is just overwhelming. It's like, I had to. I just, I couldn't take it. So anyway. It was a very short experience. It was short but mind-blowing. But there are other people who've had much better ones. But anyway.
Do you feel like it's
thing happened to me? That's funny. I had a very short Jesus experience. I tried to see him and it never worked. And then one day it did.
Yeah.
And it was very short and very overwhelming.
Yeah. And that's what kind of gets me about some of these religious fanatics who say, oh, the out of body is, it's a sin or whatever. It's against Christianity. It's like, no, that's not, in the Bible, in 2 Corinthians, St. Paul talks about a man who he knew that 14 years ago had an experience that was, he was taken to heaven. And St. Paul says, I don't know if he was in the body or out of the body. I don't know. God knows. But the fact that St. Paul talks about out-of-body experience in such a mundane, light, he's not saying OBEs are against, they're not a trick of Satan. They're not anything like that. It's like, this is actually a real opportunity for Christians to find their own answers, right? They can actually meet Jesus Christ, maybe embrace him, shake his hand, whatever, the real person, rather than getting knowledge secondhand. And that's one of the things, if you get anything out of my talks and my babbling on, it's that experience trumps belief. It trumps faith. There's nothing like firsthand experience. And of course, the organized religions don't want you to get your own answers because that's where they get their money. That's where they get their power.
Control us, yes.
It's a control game, right? They want to control all of their worshipers, and this is how you get to God. You got to go through us, right? No, you can find your own answers. And it's like, I'm never going to tell anyone what to believe. I'm never going to tell anyone. It's like the experience is out there, and it's real, and it's fantastic, and you can get your own answers, and it's well worth doing.
So how long did it take you to, once you started doing Robert Monroe's. That's exactly how I started. You described the vibrations. I thought I was being electrocuted too. I seriously thought I'd stuck my finger in the light socket. Robert Monroe said, you might feel a mild vibration. Mild? Are you kidding me? I thought I was dying.
Well, and the
But how long did
vibration,
it take you to get good at it?
it depends. The vibrations, by the way, just as a side note, they can be very rough and electrical at first, but the more you do it, the smoother they get. And I've said this before too, is over the years they've gotten so smooth that I don't even notice them anymore. And like I don't know, about a year ago or something, I had an out of body in which I felt the vibrations, and it startled me. It's like, wow, that hasn't happened in a long time. I haven't really felt the vibrations in a long time because normally they're not, they're so quiet and in the background. But I mean, they're only scary at first. There's a book out there that Nancy Tribolato, or I think is the name of the author, and talks about the vibrations a lot. And she compares them as being, she says they're very pleasurable. And she says she even compares them to orgasm. And so it depends on the person, and their level of experience and all of that. But anyway, no, I mean, to get proficient, I mean, it was slow. It took me a couple of years before I got any good at it. And even now I have to work quite hard at it to get an experience. But I mean, I think when I was at the top of my game, I was probably having 3 or 4 out-of-body experiences a month. And a lot of times that's because I would only practice on the weekends, right? I was going to school and I was working, and I was trying to work enough, working on the weekends and stuff like that, trying to get enough money to pay tuition for school and all of this. And so I was only able to practice my out-of-body techniques on the weekends. And so Saturday morning, Sunday morning were kind of my go-to times for doing that. And so so that's kind of why I was doing that. But yeah, it took a while. It came about slowly. Okay, I saw something flash on the screen from Mike.
Yeah, he was just talking about how he had the Jesus experience as well. And it was
awesome, my friend. All right, cool, very cool. Yeah, I mean, it's just mind blowing. It really is.
Wow. So, when this all started for you, how long were you able to stay out, and how long were you able to, like, how long are your out of body experiences?
It varies greatly. For most people, out of body experiences are very short, and they range from 1 or 2 seconds. Or I think about the longest out of body I had was about 3.5 hours, I think. And in that time, it's like I would go off and do things, and then I would get like called back to my physical body, but I'd still be out of the body, but I'd be at its location. So then I'd just separate again and go off in another direction. But I mean, that went on for probably 3.5 hours. And of course, after that amount of time, you can't remember everything that's going on, right? And but there are tricks you can do to make them last longer. For example, if you feel like you're losing cohesion, what I call losing cohesion, if you feel like your consciousness or your awareness is starting to deteriorate and you're concerned that you're going to get sucked back to your body, what you can do is you start touching things. So you engage your sense of touch. And so what you can do is, put your hands on your own wrists, your own arms, your face, whatever. Just try and touch anything that's nearby. I mean, if you see your bed, touch it. If you see a dresser, touch it. I mean, touch the walls, touch the floors, whatever. But engage that sense of touch, and that can help you stabilize your out-of-body experience. But yeah, I mean, your typical out-of-body, I would say, lasts, maybe only 5 to 7 minutes. And after that, it gets to a point where, I figure, well, I'm not going to remember all of this. I better go back to my body to record it or whatever.
All right. Well, I think this might be a good time to pop up a few questions.
Okay.
So let me see. Here is one from Fun Talks TV. And he's asking, the biggest fear of visiting this new world of the astral is the possibility of not coming back. Is there any evidence of this being possible?
You know, it kind of starts getting into the philosophy and spirituality of it, because my personal belief, I've been doing this 44 years, right, since 1979, and I've never had a problem. I've always come back. And I've been in situations out of body where I've been in the depths of outer space where I didn't even see, where I just see stars out there. I don't see a sun nearby. Like out in our, if I was close to the earth, you would see the sun in one direction or another. But I've been in deep space where there's nothing but a field of stars out there, and not knowing where the heck am I, and not have any clue where you are, how you're going to get back, but you always get pulled back. But when I say it's related to your spirituality, what I mean is I believe our higher selves send us to this earth to learn certain spiritual lessons. And I believe that our higher self has invested a great deal of time and energy to create this physical body, and it's not ever going to let go of that very easily. I talked about earlier how deep the subconscious and the levels of awareness go and in each person. And, at a certain level, you're only seeing a tiny bit of that awareness, conscious awareness.
Right.
Yeah. So I don't think that your higher self, which is further out down in the chain, is going to let you get lost. It'll always bring you back, because that's why you're here. There's a kind of a famous quote from Richard Bach, the author of, several books, Jonathan Livingston Seagull and One and all of this. He wrote many books, but he has a famous quote where he says, if you don't know if your purpose here on earth is done, all you have to do is ask yourself if you're alive. Because if you're alive, you're not done. You still got stuff that you need to do, right? And so I kind of live by that rule. Is I believe that we're here for a purpose, and you're not going to get lost, and you're not going to be separated from your body unless that it's your intended time to go. And I do believe, and I know this from experience, our lives are very planned. Hi, Dolly. Dolly is back. Our lives are very planned, and they're not scripted. They're not really. There's no such thing as destiny, because we can do whatever we want. But I do know that we spend a great deal of our time during sleep planning what's going to happen in our lives, and we plan it way out months in advance. And so you're not gonna. You're meant to go through these experiences and meant to learn these lessons. And anyway, that's my take on the whole deal. I don't think it's possible to leave before your time.
No, I don't think there's any real danger. There was a book out there from Van de Veer. He says astral travel is as safe as sleeping, and that really resonated with me, because I feel like we're all doing it every night. And
We
really
are.
The trick is remembering.
We are. Yeah, and as a matter of fact, almost all out-of-body authors say the same thing. They say that we leave our bodies during sleep. It's just that most of the time we're not aware that it's happening. And I've had many instances in which I woke up in the middle of the night and found myself out of body. I'll be, I'll be lying prone, but I'll be like a foot above my physical body. And it's like, oh, okay, I woke up, and that's where I'm at. So I know that this is true. And other OBE authors like Sylvan Muldoon talked about that, and other authors as well. But yeah, we do that every night.
Yeah.
You just
I'm glad you brought up Sylvan Muldoon. He's a very early author, and boy, was he good at it.
Yes, he was. He was one of those early researchers, and he wrote his books in the 1920s, and went back when very little was known about the out-of-body experience.
Yeah, so that brings up another question for me, which is super interesting to me, because he talked about Sylvan Muldoon being able to manifest in front of people as an apparition. And I know Robert Monroe did that once. I tried so many times and never succeeded until I did it in front of Dolly, and she did see me. And then she did it to me. So Yeah.
Oh, that is cool.
I was
Yeah, I
wondering,
can
have
show
you ever tried
anybody.
that?
Yeah, I
Or
can show up. You can't. I can actually show up anywhere I want. I
Very
try not
cool.
to though because you can scare people bad, so I don't do it anymore. So,
have you
Yeah,
ever tried that or had that experience?
I've tried to do that. One time, when I was living in a suburb of Minneapolis called Spring Lake Park, we had a split level home, and I always go to bed before my wife, and had to get up next morning to go to work. And my wife was staying up watching TV in the basement, so she was on the lower level. I was on the upper level. I left my body and I glided down the stairs effortlessly and turned the corner, glided down the rest, and I saw her, in front of the TV, watching TV, and I stood right in front of her. It's like, Kathy, can you see me? It's like, I'm right here. She never saw me. So yeah, no, I've tried it and never been successful. A
It's
lot of people,
frustrating. You feel like a ghost. I mean, you are one, but I've
yeah,
tried that so many times in front of my brothers and sisters, and
yeah,
nothing.
yeah. I've tried to do that too, and a lot of people ask me, can I visit them and pull them out of their body while they're sleeping and help them get out? And I've tried that many times too, and not been successful at it as well. And I talked to William Buhlman, the author of several books on out of body,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
he said the same thing, that he's tried many times to pull people out of their body, and he's never been successful at it. So
I
I've had
don't,
a
I
few
don't think
people
we have
pull
the
me
right to
out.
do that. Have you?
Well,
Really?
spirits, they were already
Oh,
on the other
okay.
side.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think you can claim somebody to come out of by your will. It has to be by theirs.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
that's
Yeah,
the thing.
sometimes I've gone to somebody's bedside and said, "Come on, let's go out of body," and they're like, "No, I'm not ready. I'm not going. I'm not ready."
Right.
But when you're out of body and you talk to somebody who's still in the body, you're talking to their subconscious, so they won't have a
It's the
conscious memory
weirdest thing.
of
I've had
having done
that.
that. But you can still
Yeah.
talk to them, but they'll, and even when they're awake, you can talk to them. I've many times visited someone and they're going about their daily business, and you try and talk to them and get their attention, and they act very distracted. They're walking around doing things and picking up books and whatever, and they will talk to you and you can hear them, but you're talking to their subconscious and they don't really know that you're there. So
It's the oddest experience.
yes,
It's really strange when that happened. I'm like, what is going on here?
yeah,
And I called them up and they did not remember. And I'm like, well, gosh, I know I'm not making this up. And if
yeah,
Robert Monroe hadn't mentioned that, I would have thought, I'm like, what is going on?
yeah,
It has to do with it all goes back to your using your abilities. Your physical mind has to have a working pineal gland, and it has to be on and hearing properly. That way, your physical mind can hear what your consciousness is saying in other people's. That's how psychic ability works. And in my youth, I used to get up in the middle of the night and go to my parents' bedroom and talk to my parents. And they'd be laying there. And then one night, my father sat up and he pointed at the door, and he said, "Go." And I was like, he sees me. And I walked back to my room and I stayed in there. I was afraid to come back out. It was my dad. And a couple days later, he said, "We need to talk." And I said, "Okay." And he said, you can go out of body, can't you?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "I can now see you. I'm listening for you now. No running around unsupervised." And I went, "What?" It freaked me out. And I was really small. And he said, "Seriously, no running around unsupervised." And I said, "Okay." And he said, "You'll know when it's okay. You have to know all that's knowable before you can go out again." And I thought about that for a while. Know all that's knowable. Are you crazy? How do I do that? He said, "You'll figure it out." And I sort of did as I got older. But yeah, you can't. I'm at the point now where I can go out of body while I'm talking to you. Okay. I feel the vibration and it's like I shift. Okay. And I can feel my body operating because I'm totally connected now. I'm like simulcasting live.
Yeah, there were saints who could do this, and they actually ended up
Yeah.
bilocating and could physically.
right.
I don't think I can do that yet. Yeah,
And
but
not just ancient saints either. Yogananda could do that as well.
That's insane. I mean, just goes to show how unlimited we are. Like you were talking about, the things we can do. are off the charts.
Yep.
And another thing I wanted to ask you, Bob, because I'm curious about this, is the silver cord, which is, of course, what's attached to you and what pulls you back. And I never saw it for years and years and years. Finally, I did. It was all wrapped around me. I got very confused. I ended up traveling inside of it and going inside my consciousness. And it was a long, weird experience. But another time I did see it, and it was just this big, thick thing filled with multiple cords. So I'm wondering what your experience has been with this. Well, could you explain to people what it is who have never heard of it and what your experience is with it?
The reference or the name silver cord comes from the Bible, and I believe the book of Ecclesiastes talks about if it references when you die. It talks about when the silver cord breaks or the bow is loosed or something like that. But the silver cord is I would say about half people experience the silver cord and about half people don't. A lot of people look for the silver cord and never find it. And there's really no good explanation why that is. I know in my earlier out-of-body experiences, I used to have all kinds of problems with my silver cord. I'd walk away from my body and I'd be, trucking or whatever, and I'd feel this tug on my back, like I had a big elastic rubber band attached to my back, and I'd just get pulled back, back to my physical body by this thing. And I would get angry at the thing. And I even, in my first book, Out of Body Experiences, I have an amusing story where I got fed up with it finally. I mean, I was trying to go different places, do different things. I had arranged to meet a friend and at her house and try and describe her house to her because I had never been there, but she wanted, we were trying to establish proof, right? So I was going to get to her house, and this silver cord kept interfering with me. And so at one point I actually got really mad, and I turned around and I grabbed hold of it, and it's like a hose, right? Like a garden hose. And I pulled on that cord as hard as I could. It's like, I thought, I was just furious. And I yanked on that thing so hard, I thought it ought to break. If it was a real physical thing, it ought to break. But it didn't. It kind of flopped to the floor. And then and the experience ended pretty quickly after that. But it's like playing tug of war with yourself.
Emotion.
But yeah, in more in the last many years, I haven't even noticed or seen my silver cord in many, many years now. So I think, again, that might be having to do with, I don't know if you want to call it, a lot of people theorize that, when you're first starting out, you have lower vibrations or whatever. And when you start having astral projections or whatever, you get more spiritual, or it kind of wakens you up to be more spiritual, and that increases your vibration level. And with the increase in vibration level, you have less encumbering experiences. You have less of the lower astral or whatever experiences, less silver cord problems, less problems with eyesight, all of these things. And it just comes with experience.
Yeah, I wish people would use the right terminology. You know what it is? It's the volume of your ability. When you're on you have a radio, an old-timey radio, and it's got a band of frequencies on it, right? Mm-hmm. And each one of those frequencies vibrates, and it produces a sound. And when you tune into that frequency, you can hear it. But if it's too low, you have to turn the gain on the power. You have to add energy into it to bring it louder to you. And so people don't understand, it's not raising your vibration, it's turning the sound up or turning the power up on it is what's happening. Your heart is where, like I said, where your consciousness resides. It's electrical. And your connection, the silver cord, is literally coming from your chest because it's the electrical connection to your consciousness. And when you get emotional, when you're outside of your body, it can pull you back because your heart's calling it. Something's wrong, and it'll pull you back. In other words, your body is guiding you, whether you know it or not. That connection to your physical body, because you chose to be here, is overpowering you to come back. It's an emotional response to whatever you're experiencing out there. And I know a lot of OBE is really, if I get upset or I cry or get mad, boom, they're right back in their body. And it's true. It yanks you back because it's protecting you and bringing you home to the body that you're dwelling in. And most people don't
some people call the astral body the emotional body.
The emotional body, yes.
Yeah.
Well, we do need to take a quick station ID break. So if you'll hold on for just a second, I want to let everyone know that you are watching The Lightgate. I'm Preston Dennett. My lovely co-host is Dolly Safran. And tonight we are speaking with Robert Peterson. He's the author of many books on astral projection. Definitely you want to check them out. We'll be popping them up on the screen towards the end of the show. And you can find them in the show notes. He also has this amazing website where he's got lots of articles. I want to let you know that we are streaming live on United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in the beautiful city of New Orleans. Also, the UFO Paranormal Radio Network at 105.3 FM. We are on several other platforms such as YouTube and Roku and Facebook. And we are so delighted, Robert, to have you on the show tonight. Chat is alive with questions of all kinds, and we will definitely be getting to them. We're now at the second half of the show.
Actually, we have 15 more minutes tonight because we redid the show, so we can go until 20 after. So like at 11:15, if that's okay with you, Bob, we can shut it down then.
Sure, that's fine.
All right.
Perfect. I was wondering about that. Thank you, Dolly. We did have some technical difficulties for those who are joining us late. The beginning of the show was a bit rocky, but these things happen. So, Bob, here is a little picture you sent me, which is a funny meme, and I think it's a good jump-off point to a question that I'm curious about, which is the astral wind. I have never experienced this, and I'm wondering what the heck that is, because people describe this in the books where an astral wind comes up and it blows you all over the place. I think, Dolly, you've had that.
Yes, I have. I used to fly it. I'm not kidding you. I'd go out of body and I'd pick up that wind and whoop, I'd take off and go with it.
I've never had that. Never.
Yeah, I've had that happen. And a lot of people complain about that too. It's like you're trying to get to a specific destination and it's like this wind comes and just picks you up and takes you somewhere else where you're meant to be. I don't know.
Yeah, don't fight. Let's go.
It's like you're trying to get somewhere. So yeah, that's one of my, I've made a lot of memes for Facebook that there's a couple of groups that I frequent on Facebook. One of them is astral projection memes. And I try and keep it strictly to astral projection memes. And the other one is astral projection dash techniques. And these guys rock. 2 years ago, this group had 18,000 members on Facebook, and now it has almost 100,000 members. I checked it earlier today, 95,481 members on Facebook. But anyway, they have an amazing team of moderators, and shout out to those guys. But you have a lot of good information out there. But I like to post my memes out there. And like this one about the astral winds. And yeah, a lot of people have experienced that. Some people don't. But it's interesting that Dolly, that you've had it.
Never had it.
First time it grabbed me, I went, literally left where I lived, went all the way over to the other side of the planet, and I was on top of a mountain. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know why I was there. I was like standing there for the longest time going, okay, I'm here. What do you want? And, what else am I going to do? And I sat down and I just sat there and sat there and sat there. And then finally, this voice comes out of nowhere and said, now do that on your own. I was like, what? I could do this on my own, go anywhere. I mean, it gave me a big heads up that the planet's not too small for me to go anywhere on the thing. I'd never done that before. I always stayed around where I lived. And I've had other instances where I've been picked up by that. I don't know if it's the all mind, what people call God, trying to direct me and show me what I need to know, or I have no clue yet. I haven't figured that out yet.
Well, and that brings up what you said brings up an important point, though, Dolly, is that's one of the major differences between an astral projection and a lucid dream. People ask, well, what's the differences? Are they the same thing? In my experience, no, they're not the same thing. Like in a lucid dream, your dream has a stream of things that keeps happening. In an astral projection, you can be bored. Like you said, you found yourself in this on this mountain or whatever, and you sat there and sat there, you can definitely be bored in an out of body if you want to. Nothing necessarily happens like it does in a dream.
Right.
Oh yeah, Preston just brought up a diagram that I like to refer to. This is how I like to look at it. On the lower side, lower left, these are all experiences in which we are out of body, right? You can be in a dream state where out of body, but you're unconscious, but you're experiencing a subjective thing. You're experiencing a hallucination, basically. In a lucid dream, which is the LD on there, you're conscious and you're aware that you're dreaming. You know that you're dreaming, but you're still subjective. So your world that you're experiencing is all a hallucination. And a lot of times, most of the time, you have complete control. So it's like you can walk up to a doorway and you can say, well, I expect that when I open that doorway, there's going to be a beautiful woman on the other side. And you go and you open the doorway and there's a beautiful woman there.
I've done that, actually.
In an out of body, which is the upper right quadrant, you're conscious, but your world is more objective. It's not a subjective world. You can walk up to a door and say, I expect there's going to be a beautiful woman on the other side, and open the door and there's not. I mean, a lot of times in an out of body, your expectations are not met. In a lucid dream, they most often are. And then in the lower right hand, people always ask, what is S dream? And that stands for shared dream. In the some authors, like author Robert Moss, talk about shared dreams. And this is where you're unconscious. So you're dreaming. It's a regular dream, but you're still in that objective, verifiable world. So like two people can dream that they're at the Brooklyn Bridge and they can see each other. Oh, hey, I saw you at the Brooklyn Bridge in a dream. Well, funny, I dreamed the same thing and I saw you there. And it's like, they're strange. Okay, so it's a shared dream. But anyway, it's fascinating. But that's kind of how I see it. But I kind of went off on a tangent there, Dolly. So,
no, that's okay. That's cool what you said. I like that. I think about those things a lot. I share dreams with Preston sometimes. Okay, we'll be talking.
Into my dreams. She comes right into them.
Yeah. And it's like, I wonder what the heck this means. And if he's having an issue or something, I'll get drawn to it and I'll go share the dream with them and watch or participate.
She's very good at this stuff, Dolly is. She's more so than anyone I've really talked to.
It's just, and I know I'm dreaming. I know it's a dream. And I'll ask him the next day, okay, so what was it you were dreaming last night? And he'll tell me. And I'm like, and I said, do you realize I was there? And he's like, yes. And he'll tell me parts that I didn't tell him. We're verifying back and forth. And I know it's a dream. And I don't know if we're working stuff out. We got questions. What is that? Maybe it's a psychological thing where your consciousness is trying to relay to your physical mind things it wants you to understand. I'm not sure. I kind of have a feeling that could be it.
Yeah, I see Angela popped up a question. I realize I'm dreaming. I jump out of my dreams into astral. For me, yeah, I mean, that's right. Usually what happens to me is I'll realize I'm dreaming, but it's like I dispel the illusion of the dream. I just, the hallucination of the dream just dissolves into nothingness, and I'll find myself, hanging in space or floating near my body or something like that. And I'll know that I'm no longer dreaming. In a lucid dream, I mean, it slays me. In Stephen LaBerge's book, Lucid Dreaming, he thought that out-of-body experiences were kind of a poor quality lucid dream, because in a lucid dream, you're dreaming, and out of body, you don't, right? That was like, no, my take is completely the opposite. In a lucid dream, you're dreaming. In an out of body, you're not dreaming, and you're still conscious and aware, and you're still there, and it's in your face.
Yeah.
Well, like you said, it's even more real sometimes than being awake.
Yeah. I came to the realization a while back that we're supposed to be able to be out of body anytime we want to, that our consciousness is not solely locked in here. And when we don't know we're doing it and we're sleeping, and your consciousness just goes, man, I'm out of here. And it'll leave and go do stuff on its own. And the physical mind's just not aware. Like you said, it's subconscious. I call the physical mind your subconscious. It doesn't get it, and doesn't know what's happening. And I woke up one day and I went, this is weird, because if everybody knew that they were aware like this, and that out of body is the normal state of being, they might figure things out faster or accept it more. It won't be frightening to them anymore, whatever. But that's what I came to. I realized that we are OBE all the time. Our consciousness is universal. It's coming. We're not even in this body here. We're coming from somewhere else into this body. We're, like there's a cord to
We're
us.
projecting down
soul.
here,
Yeah.
from our true home.
Right.
Yeah.
It's all a matter of focus. Yeah.
Right.
So I want to pop up another meme, which is super funny, made me laugh out loud, but it's about repercussion. When you come back too fast
Oh, yeah.
and you feel a little bit disoriented. I've had that a few times, and
Yeah.
here with this very cute meme.
I like that. Perfect.
So is that something you've experienced where you just come back too hard or suddenly? Is there any danger?
Yeah. Well, I remember, and I talked about this. This is again one of those things from the first book that nobody ever wrote about it until I did. One time I induced the vibrations and I lifted up out of my body, but then my body's here and my astral self is here, and I twisted around to be so that my head was above my physical body's feet and my feet were above my head, and so I was completely turned around, and then all of a sudden I slammed back into my body, and it's like, whoa, this is the most disoriented, weird feeling of what happens when you get into your body backwards. And it kind of blew me away. But that crash landed cat is kind of it. I've had other experiences that were like that it can be very disorienting.
Have you ever encountered any negative entities out of body?
I have encountered a few, but I told somebody, I think it was just yesterday, I was chatting with people. I've been doing this 44 years, and in all of that time, I've probably only had 10 or 12 experiences in which I felt remotely unsafe. I've come across some menacing looking creatures and people, and it's like when that happens, I'm just like, nope, not going to do this, and I just abort the OBE because I don't want to deal with it. There have also been times when I've seen ugly, slimy creatures, and they start like spewing. Robert Monroe called them what did he call them? Anyway, thought reballs, I think he called them, where you have a ball of telepathy that's kind of thrown at you. But I mean, this creature started throwing pornographic reballs at me, and it's like I just start yelling. I just yelled at it and said, get away from me, you disgusting filth, and all of that. But I was telling the person yesterday, my golden rule is it's better to be angry than afraid, because if you're afraid of an entity, if you see some kind of scary entity or whatever, if you're afraid, you're giving them power.
That's right.
And power is how they control you. The fear is how they control you. And if you're not afraid, people that are in the physical body actually have more to be frightened of out there than other non-physical entities.
Right.
And it's because we have emotional centers that aren't common out there. And so we can, if you see an unsavory creature, what Robert Bruce calls astral wildlife, I love that term. If you see an unsavory creature, it's better to be angry and yell at it, give it the fifth degree, tell it to go away, yell at it, scream at it, but don't be afraid of it.
Right.
And some people say, love and light, and just give it a hug, send it that doesn't work for me. Maybe I'm a lower vibration, if you want to say that. But for me, but whatever you do, don't be afraid of it. The word that the like I said, last resort, just end the out of body, and it's easy to do that usually by thinking about your physical body. Just think about your hands or whatever, your physical hands, and it'll usually bring you back.
Yeah.
But usually, I've had one of the experiences, and in my second book, Lessons Out of the Body, I talk about all of those, all of the ones up to that point of where I felt unsafe. And it's like probably the scariest one, I left my body, and I immediately found myself surrounded by what looked like an angry mob, and they looked like they were ready to lynch me. They were holding clubs and things like that. And I just said, nope, not going to do it. And I just aborted the experience, went back to my body, no harm, no foul. So that's about the worst that can happen. And I mean, I can understand being concerned because in and out of body, you're dealing with humankind's biggest fears, right? Fear of the unknown and fear of death.
Well, humans are taught to be afraid, and they take it with them. And if we stop teaching each other to be afraid, when I was 5 years old, I had some entity or something tell me it was the devil. I was its child, and it kept chasing me around. And I just go home, go back. And it was over and over and over again. It was like dogging me. And I snapped one night, and I took apart a staircase I was on. I pulled one of the spools off it, and I went after it. And I said, "Come here. Let's have a nice day with each other. Come here. I'm going to hurt you now." And it looked at me like, "Oh my God, what are you talking about?" And I said, "You're done. You're out. I'm going to get you." And it ran from me and left, and it never came back. Never came back again. And I woke up that day,
And that kind of brings up, another deal I've got. Thanks, Preston, for bringing up this slide. There's a thing called ASP, which stands for Awareness During Sleep Paralysis. And a lot of people, what happens is sleep paralysis is something your body naturally and normally does every night in order to prevent you from hurting yourself while you dream and while you sleep. And so your body paralyzes itself. It's perfectly normal and natural. But sometimes you become aware and awake during that state when your body is still paralyzed. And it's a perfect jumping point to leave your body. But what happens is a lot of people experience ASP, and then they figure they can't move. They find they can't move. They're paralyzed. And so they become afraid. And their fear manifests as a monster or a creature. And then you're kind of stuck between the hallucinated world of dreams and the real world. And so your fear manifests a monster. You see the monster, it makes you more afraid. And that's kind of a never-ending cycle, right? Your fear of the monster. And then of course you're afraid. It's like people are deathly afraid of if I go to sleep, I'm going to have this monster again, tormenting me. And so they're deathly afraid of the monster or demon or whatever. And that leads them back to sleep paralysis. And it's a never-ending cycle. Right. And the thing is, you can actually leverage that to induce OBEs, right? Because if you realize that you're in sleep paralysis, you don't have to be afraid. You know that this is a hallucination. You can confront the monster or creature or whatever, and you can leave your body. I see Mike do the same thing. I say, "Get the hell away from me." Yeah, it's a good reaction. Yeah.
I'm like done with you. Okay.
But basically, you can use that to induce OBEs, right? Because that fear that it's going to happen again causes it to happen again. So you can kind of use that feedback loop and take that advantage of that.
So you can see the truth. That's the whole point, I think that we're taught to be afraid here as a control to keep us from going out of body and learning about things as they really are.
Exactly. Okay. Because what happens is there's this thing called, most people don't talk about it, called the dweller on the threshold or the gatekeeper or whatever. Right. And it's, in my opinion, it's a part of your subconscious, and it throws these things, scary things at you, kind of to keep you from going out of body until you're ready for it. Right? You have to learn to confront your fears, and you have to learn to, you have to get beyond that fear barrier. And once you learn to get beyond that fear barrier and you confront these creatures or whatever, or, no, I'm not falling for it this time, that kind of thing. Yeah. Then you'll find your freedom. Then you'll be able to go out and you won't have these creatures anymore because, okay, now you've passed. It's almost like you've passed the test. It's like your subconscious or your higher self throws these things at you to make sure you don't go out of body until you're ready to face anything. Right. And once you're ready, then there's no more purpose in having these scary things.
You become the master programmer of what you're doing. There's an old saying in computers, and this: garbage in and garbage out. Okay? Right. And we're habitual. Our brains, our DNA implied, the way we work is it's habitual. All your habits will replay over and over and over again until you change the habit. You reprogram what's going on in your own physical mind. Right. And So you've been programmed to watch horror movies, to hear horrible things, to see horrible things, to talk about horrible things, and you don't realize that you're reprogramming your brain to think that way. Your brain doesn't always, you don't originally come out of the womb thinking that way. You don't.
Right.
Your
Right.
slate is clean except for what your consciousness has already put into it, and now you're being bombarded with this. And this is a pet peeve of mine. It's like the greatest thing we can give each other is to stop the negativity thinking. Stop it. Just stop. If we all did that in one day, the whole world would change overnight because we'd be more attached to what's knowable and true, other than horrific and painful. And
Yeah, I agree completely with you, Dolly. As a matter of fact, I love music, and a lot of people know I like strange music. All right, one of my favorite genres is like female-fronted heavy metal music. But
woo, okay.
a lot of the metal music, a lot of heavy metal music is very negative, and you have to be very careful of how you're programming your mind.
Right.
That negativity can seep in. And I think that like in the 90s, there was a lot of grunge bands coming out of Seattle and stuff, and Soundgarden and stuff. And a lot of these songs are very negative, and I think they're sending us, negative messages. And most people who are fans like me can look at that consciously and say, okay, I know this is not applies to me or whatever. This doesn't apply to me or whatever. But it seeps into your subconscious nonetheless.
It does.
And so you have to be very careful. You have to combat that kind of negativity with
We actually had a former guest on the show, Rafael Lugo, who was creating that kind of music and stopped because he had an out-of-body experience and saw that actually play out firsthand.
Absolutely.
So you're 100% right. And he illustrated it with a personal experience. It was amazing.
Interesting.
So I've got 14 questions here that are amazing. And I'm hoping we can get through a bunch of these. And here's a really interesting one from Mike, because, there's different abilities the astral body has. And one of them is stretching longer than it normally can. And I mean, you can teleport, you can fly, but he's asking, Bob, have you ever experienced the speed you can get to while stretching yourself? I went so fast that I could feel the vibrations throughout my body that I felt like wavelets of energy flowing. So maybe that's what he's talking about.
Yeah, and to be honest, Mike, I haven't ever tried to stretch my body like that, like you're describing. So no, that sounds like an interesting experiment. I'm always experimenting out there, so it's something fun. I'll have to try that.
Yeah, me too. When I read it in somebody's books, I'm like, well, they visited the lower hellish planes. Let's try that. Or like someone asked me, what are you wearing when you're out of body? I'm like, I never even checked. I looked down. Really. I wear a button-down shirt, my work clothes. I actually took off all my clothes once because I was curious. And, all my hair comes back. I'm super strong. I'm really young. So there's so much to explore. All these different experiments you can do.
Yeah.
One of the things that I like to remember is that our consciousness is light. We are light beings, okay? And when you come out, the stretching that he's trying to do is literally him sending himself out in one long strand of light. And what's cool about that is that you're traveling through, you're outside of space-time when you do it. We're not in space-time when we're OBE. We're outside of it. And you can go clean across the universe all the way to the other side and then catch up with yourself and stand there and look at the end of it and then come back. But you gotta understand that's what you're doing. And Mike, if you're hearing this, that's what you're doing. You're not stretching. You are light, and you're sending your light somewhere else. Think of it that way and see what you do with it. So.
All right. Well, I got a bunch more questions I want to get through. Here's one I'm just going to pop up quick. And this is to you, Dolly. Do you plan to write a book, possibly with Preston, about your OBE experiences? I hope so.
I hope so. Yeah, bring it.
We'll talk about that, Dolly. What do you think? Okay, and here is a good question for you, Bob, and this is from Brian Morgan. I like this question because there's a lot of people out there who haven't really experienced this, and his question is, Bob, for first-timers, what would you recommend someone read or do who've never had an OBE but want to try, and is there anything you'd say not to do?
Well, actually, what I always recommend is before you buy any book on out of body or astral projection, check my blog, because on my website, robertpeterson.org, I've got an index to my blog, which is articles about astral projection, and I've got a whole bunch of book reviews, an index to my book reviews, and check it out which ones are rated the highest, because and read my book reviews. So you can go out there and you can see what's good and what's bad. And I usually include, what techniques they share and all of that. The reason I wrote my first book, Out of Body Experiences, How to Have Them and What to Expect, is so that it would be a good place for people to learn. And as Preston kind of hinted earlier, at the end of every chapter of the book, I've got an exercise section of something that you can do to actually kind of work your way into the out of body state. And so that is, in my opinion, the best place to start. And obviously I'm biased because I wrote the book, but I designed it to try and give people a good foundation and learn how to do it. My latest one, Hacking the Out-of-Body Experience, is it's very sciencey, and it goes into best practices. It doesn't really tell you what to expect. It doesn't really tell you, what my experiences are or have been. But it goes into the science of it. Like, for example, scientists have learned that people who are more easily hypnotized, or in other words, score more highly on the Telegen absorption scale, if you want to get technical, tend to have more out-of-body experiences than people who don't. And so there are techniques to be able to increase these things. People who play video games, for example, tend to have more out-of-body experiences than people who don't play video games. So these are the kind of hints and things. But if you go to my website, robertpeterson.org, almost all of that information is out there available. It's free. I don't charge for any of that. Like Preston said, my entire first book is available on my website for free. You can read it there. And it's been there since before it was published. And my publisher, Hampton Roads Publishing, I have to give them a lot of credit, because I asked them, is it okay for me to put this out on my website before it's published and everything? And they said, well, it's your content. You can do whatever you want, right? You own the copyright. And there were a lot of people. I mean, Bill Buellman said, you're crazy. You're going to lose sales doing that. And I'm like, no, because this way my book becomes available to people in Africa who don't, they got a computer maybe, but they're not going to be able to buy it on Amazon or something, or buy it in the United States market or whatever. So I made it available to the whole world that way. And it kind of proves that I'm not in it for the money. So you can go out to my website. There's tons of information out there for free. It's a good place to start. And I've got, like I said, book reviews for other books that are out there, and you can figure out which ones are the best ones. And also, I've got a couple of articles on my blog index too that are I've got a one that I called Best of Breed Out of Body Books, and it's like, by best of breed, I mean these are the best technique books that are out there. These are the best books that show you what it's like, and give you the best narratives, out of body narratives, so you know what it's like. These are the best ones coming from a Wiccan type perspective, whatever. So I try and break it down into categories, and so that's another good place to start, is my OBE Best of Breed books article on the blog.
Cool. Well, we've got a bunch of questions, so I'm hoping we can get through them all, but let's just try anyway.
Okay.
Business is asking, what type of meditation do this?
Any kind of meditation helps, but for out-of-body inducing, I do a very specific type of. It's more like focusing, like Dolly was saying. It's more a matter of focusing than it is a matter of actually meditating. When I meditate, I don't often have OBEs, and when I do OBEs, it's it's usually not a meditation. I remember one time many years ago, I went to a meditation class and I thought, oh, this will be fun. And I started, and it was a guided meditation. We were lying on the floor and the person was kind of walking us through this whole deal, trying to get us out of body or whatever. No, it was a meditation. They're trying to do this and that. And I got bored with it. Nothing was happening. So I like tuned it out and I started doing my out of body stuff instead. And the vibrations rushed into me and I started to leave my body. And then it's like, oh, the class is over. It was like the meditation was over. It's like, crap, I was almost there. I was that close.
Yeah, well, meditation in any form, I think, is very helpful. So.
Very helpful. Yes, meditation is a good practice. I try to do that as often as I can.
All right. Well, here's another question. And I've often talked about this. Setting an intention before your out-of-body experience will help you remain focused and be successful in achieving what you want. And Janice is asking about that. Have you ever tried to intend to go to a particular place or have a particular experience? I know I've done that for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. In the first book, Out of Body Experiences, I kind of talk a long time on the trials and tribulations of trying to get to some, my friend Lisa's house and all of this stuff, trying to, where I would try different things to get there. And I mean, some of these out of body books, the astral projection books, would say, all you got to do is think of a place and you're there. Well, it was never that straightforward for me. Maybe that was for some people, but for me, it didn't work that way. So I had to work with it and figure this out. And a lot of people, come to me and say, well, did you ever resolve those issues? Because I kind of left it hanging, I guess, in the first book. And the answer is yes. There's what you have to do, and it's very hard to describe because it's more an action than something you can describe. It's like you actually think of that person that you're trying to get to or that place that you're trying to get to, and it's like you set a hook there and then you pull yourself toward that hook. And it's really hard to explain how to do that, but that's kind of what it's like. Is if you want to get to a particular person, you not only think about that person, but you kind of like set an intention for that person, and then you pull yourself toward it. And it's really hard to explain. I'm sorry I can't explain it better, but that's kind of what you have to do.
Yep, I agree. All right, well, here is another excellent question, and I'm very curious about this because to me, this is one of the best benefits of going out of body is being able to visit deceased loved ones. And Melanie Russell is asking this. Have you ever contacted a loved one that has passed on in the astral planes?
The answer is yes. But I've got a article on my blog called "Contacting Dead Loved Ones" or something like that. I wrote several years ago. In my first book, I talk about an experience in which I saw my dead father after he had passed, and he basically it was not long after he had passed, and it was a very short conversation, but he said, "Oh, you guys are making too much of a fuss. You're making too much of this and all of that, and it was my time to go," and things like that. So yeah, and it's very healing. A lot of people have found healing through doing that. I've also seen my mother after she passed. I don't like to talk about that one. That might be in a future book. But then the flip side of that is the person that you're trying to contact also has to be ready and willing to talk to you. Several years ago, my wife's best friend, Pam, died unexpectedly. She had 2 small kids, and I thought, this is a shock to everyone. I mean, she had a hole in her heart, a defect in her heart, and her heart just exploded one day. And I tried for a full year after she had died. I tried for a full year to contact her. Every out-of-body experience I had, I would try and reach for Pam and pull myself to it, and it didn't work. It was like, nope, disconnected. It's like a phone that's disconnected. The party you've reached is no longer in service, whatever. The bottom line is, I don't think Pam was ready to talk to me or anyone. She was done with that, or maybe she felt bad about leaving her 2 young kids or her husband or whatever. I'm sure it's a very emotional, traumatic time for the deceased, and plus they want to move on. So that my rule of thumb is, they have to be ready and you have to be ready. And if you can get those to both happen, then yes, you can visit loved ones in the afterlife.
All right, which I guess is kind of what Fun Talks is asking, but perhaps with a living person. I know Dolly and I have met out of body. Is this something you've been able to do with anyone, Robert?
Kind of, yes. It is possible to meet another person. I'm not quite sure if he meant meet them like for the first time and then later know that they're there, or just to meet them, meet up with somebody in the astral, whatever. But yeah, that's very possible.
All right. Well, here is another really good question, because this is something I've certainly experienced. Not so much being pulled out of body, but helping others who are earthbound. And Star Orchid 8 is asking, is it possible to be pulled out of body to help confused and disturbed souls? I'm going to say yes on that, but I'm wondering.
Absolutely, yes. Absolutely, yes. Some of the more dramatic, I'll say, out-of-body experiences I've had in the last several years. And it's funny, I've had several experiences in which I suddenly wake up out of body and I'll be surrounded by these light beings. They look like, I describe them as like giant lantern filaments, because they're like these great big glowing orbs, right? And I'm surrounded by these guys, and one of them says, "Oh crap, he's awake again. He's conscious again." And another one will say, "Well, put him back under. We're not done." And then I lose consciousness, of course. But I mean, I've had some experiences in which I've woken up in these situations where I'm being escorted by these light beings to try and help someone. And my belief is that these light beings are probably the basis for biblical angels.
Correct.
And my belief is that they go out and they help people that are disturbed or in some kind of a distress, people that are in mental institutions or whatever. And they use people like me. They use people like you and I, travelers that are out of body. And a lot of times your conscious awareness just interferes with that process. But you see, people that are in the body have lower vibrations. And so we're able to contact these disturbed souls easier. These light beings, their vibrations are so high, they can't reach down that far, down into those lower depths to rescue these people. So they employ the living. And I've seen it firsthand. They employ the living to go and help them.
Yeah.
A lot of times you're not conscious of it, and they don't want you conscious of it, but I've seen it firsthand.
Yeah, I have people here call it mediumistic abilities. Okay, I don't have to be OBE to see you if you've passed. And I see people easily who are still here with us. They haven't left, and they're wandering around. They're confused, and they don't know what that's going on, or they've got some issue that they're earthbound with. And I will get contacted by them out of nowhere. I have no control over, because they see me. They know that I'm aware. Okay, and I actually had one come up, a light being, not out of body, perfectly normal, walking around one day, and this huge light came after me. And I was like, okay, what do you want? And it pointed itself, it redirected itself. And I'm staring at this person who looked horrible to me and just could not talk, could not emote, couldn't do anything. They were like in shock. And I realized this person was from long ago. It was like stuck. And this being said, do what you got to do. And I literally took myself out of body at that point, wrapped myself around in a big hug and said, listen to me, look at me, see me, and it did. It was a male. And I said, you need to come with me. You need to come out of this. You need to wake up. You're not where you belong. Everything that you've experienced that's not okay, give it up, let it go. Come with me. Better things are going. And I literally walked him to the other side. And he went into shock when he saw it. He was like, oh, wow. And he didn't talk to me the whole time, but he did say bye and left. And I was like, oh my God, it worked. And I have that happen to me. The first time Preston showed up, OBing, to me, wanted me to see him. I'm wide awake. It's 3:30 in the morning, my time. somebody called me wanting me to talk to him, do medium stuff. And then all of a sudden, this old lady got right in my face. I could see her. And she's saying, "That's my grandson. I need to talk to him right now. You need to tell him what I'm saying." So I'm trying to relay a message to him. Okay. She just died like the day before. And they were all freaking out. And she had a message for his half sister. They're related, like half siblings. And Preston shows up and I'm going, "I can't talk to you right now. I'm on the phone with Rob." And he thought I was being robbed and it freaked him out. But that happens to me a lot more than you know. It's like, and it's something that you accept when you get to a certain level. You just go, "Okay, all right, this is my job."
Yeah.
And the reason I'm telling you this is that I have a tremendous feeling that you are doing exactly what you wanted to do here. You're like lighting a path for everybody. It's like your research and your teaching the way to go. And I have a feeling that's why you're not doing everything you want to do right now. Like you're surrounding yourself with trying to make people understand. And I think that's kind of cool, because that's our job. It's everybody's job. We're supposed to take care of one another.
Yeah.
This is the thing,
Yep. And somebody, I forget if it was William Buhlman or somebody, basically said the best thing you can possibly do to to elevate all of humanity is to do your own psychic development or whatever, to raise your own vibrations, because when you raise your own vibrations, you're raising the whole. When you learn, the whole learns, because we're all interconnected, right? So yeah, I love stories like that, Dolly.
Very cool. All right. Well, here we're probably not going to be able to get to all these questions because we've really got 5 minutes or more to answer them, and then 5 minutes to close the show. So I'm just going to see if I can pop through a few of these.
Okay, I'll try to be quick.
But Mike makes a good point, which you made quite clearly in your book, that having good morals and ethics is kind of a prerequisite to really succeeding well in this field, in this objective of astral projection.
Yep, that's very true. Yep, I found that if you're a negative person or whatever, that's the surest way to prevent yourself from going out of body. I think Albert Taylor wrote the book Soul Traveler, and one of the things I loved about that book is he said exactly that, is that if you don't have your vibrations high, you're not going to get there. And so that's just that. That's the way it is.
All right. Here's a question from Fun Talks TV. What's stopping me from going OBE and traversing Area 51 to see the craft? I tried that. I actually did it. I'm not doing it again.
Tell us what happened, Preston. I haven't tried it.
Well, I made it there, and then I got really frightened because I'm like, what if, there's ETs there, and, what if I get caught? And I went back, but then I made it there, but only with a guide, and it was a terrible, terrible place. I wasn't happy about it. I wouldn't recommend it. It's my understanding that they have, technologies that can harm you while you're out of body. I don't know if that's true. But I've read that. I don't know. It just makes me nervous, the whole idea of it.
Yeah, I think, people talk about protected places like they talk about psychic or astral bodyguards around the president and the White House and all of these things, the heads of state. I don't know whether that's true or not. I've never really tried to get to Area 51 or anything like that. I do know occasionally you run into blocks or barriers, and I'm at a loss of why am I being prevented from getting here or whatever. But
yeah. So here's a good question. Can electromagnetic fields affect you while in an OBE? Brian Morgan is asking.
In my opinion, no. I've never had a problem with that. I've never had a problem like flying through power lines or anything like that.
I did that. That was nerve-wracking the first time.
Can be a little concerning. Like once I had a car drive through me, and that was very interesting. But no, I've never had a problem with electromagnetic fields.
What about as far as using technologies? Like HemiSync. I know Robert Monroe. I don't know what PEMF is, but LJ is asking, Have you ever looked into technologies like PEMF and how it might help induce OBEs?
I don't know PEMF, and I've never really wanted to spend the money for technologies like some of these, stuff like I've tried HemiSync. I love to, some of the meta music that's put out by the Monroe Institute is, I love to meditate to that stuff, and I do think it helps in out of body stuff. But for me, like the gateway tapes and things like that from Monroe, I found it very jarring. The HemiSync would put me in the zone, and then as soon as someone's voice would come on and say, "Now focus your mind," or whatever, go to focus level 10, and like jar me back to the physical body. It's like, gee, thanks. I was getting there all on my own, and but yeah, I mean, there are some sound and light machines available out there. I've not really wanted to spend the money or time on them. And I've never really needed them. But I think they may work for some people. I think a lot of times people use these like dreaming masks and things like that to awaken lucidity for lucid dreaming. But a lot of times they like grow out of them. Their subconscious counters it, and they find other barriers or whatever. So I think it's kind of a short-term thing.
Yeah.
Once in a while, you need a kick in the butt to jar you out of your normal path of thinking. We get, like ruts in our way we think, and we got to get out of those ruts.
Yeah.
But and those kind of technologies are good for getting us out of the ruts, but they're not a good long term.
Yeah. One of the things about electromagnetism, I want to bring this up because I'm talking from knowledge now, okay? There are electromagnetic abilities that they have with tech that can affect your body. And it's not stopping you from OBEing, but it can jar your body to the point that you come back. In other words, they can block you from going any further than you've gone that day. And it's because your mind is a tool, okay? And if you can't be in contact with it, with your own brain and your own heart, they can disrupt your heartbeat, they can disrupt your thinking, they can deraz you, literally deraz you, and stop you from OBEing. And that's what they use on presidents and royalty and all that, is they're holding them a type of prisoner, to be honest with you, because they're blocking anything and everything from coming at them. They don't want them to be contacted, because think of how many people would contact them if they could. Okay, that's what's happening with that, and they do have that ability. It is in use right now. So.
Well, we're going to have to start to wrap it up. We have about 5 minutes, Bob, but I want to give you a chance to cover anything we haven't covered, or if there's anything in particular you want people to know. I'm going to flash your books on here so people know.
I mean, there's nothing in particular that I want to cover other than that. But I do want to say the experience may sound frightening, but it can be the most fun you've ever had too. I mean, it's just amazing experience and well worth the time and energy to do that. And you can't really get the same experience from like remote viewing or things. I mean, there's validation that can only go so far, but actually being out there and being away and seeing the reality of it, there's nothing that compares to that. There's a lot of good books out there. It's obviously fascinated me my whole life, and I hope to see everybody out there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I totally recommend people try it. Like Wally said, don't believe me, try it yourself. It's
Absolutely.
so worth it.
Absolutely. And read Preston's book, Out of Body Exploring.
Absolutely. It's wonderful.
I'm going to put out another one of these days too, because man, oh man, it's just nonstop.
Yep.
Experiences you can have.
And I'm waiting for Dolly's book to show on my doorstep.
I'm so busy. Yeah, I kind of encourage Preston. He's got one book he's working on right now. He's got 3 chapters left to do, and he's putting another book out. And then after that one, he says he's going to do the OBE book, and I'm dying for that to happen. I might have something to say, then. And yeah, and he speaks English better than I do. If I write, it's terrible. People don't understand me. I can speak to you perfectly, but writing is not my thing. So let Preston be my type.
I'm looking forward to it.
Okay.
Yep. Well, chat is absolutely loving all the things you had to say. And yeah, we'd love to have you back again some of these times because I know I still have all kinds of questions.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Will you
let's
come
do
back
it
again?
definitely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just give me a holler. You got my contact information.
Yes.
You know how to reach me.
Okay. All
Very
right.
cool. Well, it was so nice to have you on. Thank you
Thank you,
so
Bob,
much. I
so much.
super appreciate it.
Well,
Absolutely.
thank you both for having me on. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. I was excited. I'm even more excited now, just so you know. Okay, so this was the Light Gate for this Monday, just before Christmas. I hope you all have a wonderful holiday, and for whatever religion you are, may it be blessed, may it be happy, may it be fruitful for you all. Be safe, be happy, be warm. This has been the Light Gate. Take care, everybody. We love you. Night night.
Bye bye.